I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Paul Pape. He is a TEDx speaker, author, and creative business strategist known as Santa for Nerds. With over 20 years as a successful creative entrepreneur, Paul has designed custom collectibles for Disney, Universal, and Nickelodeon, while also building his own thriving design studio. He is the creator of Gamify Business and author of the Creative Player's Handbook to Business, a revolutionary approach that translates intimidating business concepts into language that creative minds actually understand. Using gaming principles and adventure mechanics, Paul helps artists, designers, and creative entrepreneurs build profitable businesses without sacrificing their artistic souls. His main mission is simple: to prove that you don't have to be a starving artist to be a successful one. Paul shows creatives how to approach business as the creative adventure it truly is, helping them discover that running a business can actually be fun, engaging, and deeply fulfilling. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Noah. I really appreciate it. It's good. It should be a fun conversation.
As I told Paul before we got started, my throat's decided to want to really act up today. So, and I've got to do like 5 more interviews after this. So,
Oh no.
I gotta, my throat's gonna really go through it. I don't think it's used to all this talking, so it's finally started to catch up on itself. But, so if I do sound a little different, I do apologize. My throat decided to play games with me today. But I'm gonna run through it. So, um, yeah, Paul, if you could just introduce yourself and tell my listeners a little bit more about what you do professionally.
Okay, my name, like you said, is Paul Pape, and for the last 20 years, I've owned and operated a business called Paul Pape Designs, where I can make anything, but apparently not name businesses because I just used my own name on that one. But what I do is I started off wanting to basically like I wanted an action figure of myself, and I couldn't find one without being able to buy 1,000 at a time. Off from the Far East there. And so I thought, well, let me see if I can make one myself. And so I did. And then I just kind of started going down that rabbit hole of just making things for people that they want that they couldn't get anywhere else. And back in 2006, I had a lucky break. I was at the time a professor at a university. I was in my last year there, and then I had a student ask me. This is back when the Nintendo Wii came out. I don't know if you remember that one, Noah, but
Oh, I
way
remember
back.
the Wii.
So there, you can make your own little avatar in it called the Mii's. And so this
Mm-hmm.
one of my students asked me if I could make one for him and his girlfriend for Valentine's Day, and I said sure, why not? And then unbeknownst to me, he had submitted it to a blog called Super Punch, which this is before the days of Facebook, TikTok, and all that fun stuff. So it blew up, and I started getting a lot of requests to make me's for other people. And so eventually, I started saying yes to
Hmm.
all of them, and And I was making more money doing that on the side than I was teaching. And so I think at the height of it, I was making over 20 a week, and they're all handcrafted. So I wasn't mass producing anything. This is before 3D printers and all that fun stuff. So
Mm,
I was handcrafting all those pieces, and I was doing pretty well with that. And then that's where I got my first cease and desist, which was fun. I got that from Nintendo of America. Got to talk to my first lawyers. Um, in that one. Worked out some interesting things. I'm one of those people that if I run into into a failure of sorts, it doesn't stop me. It just gives me more motivation to try to figure out how to work around it or how to overcome that failure. And so continued doing that, and then just started saying yes to everything. And so it moved on from making individual me's to other figures, wedding cake toppers, and custom wedding proposal ring boxes. And then I do funeral urns. And then eventually I got called by The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, to do some specialty pieces for them. And then I've worked with, like I said, Disney and Nickelodeon and just Universal. I've worked with a lot of different people just because I've got this mindset of being able to accomplish anything that I want. And then and make it in a timely manner, and it ends up being a fairly decent product. And so a lot of companies like working with me. And about 8 years ago, I was my studio's in my basement, and I've got three boys, and I was a stay-at-home dad, but I was also doing the excuse me, now my voice is going. I was stay-at-home dad, and but I'd also work out of my studio, and so I was just always home, but I was alone. You just sit in the basement all by yourself. And then I got bored one day and I was like, I wonder if I could do this live. My background's in theater and theater design, so I miss being in front of a live audience. And so I just Googled um, working online live, and it came up with a platform called Twitch, which, if you're familiar with it, Twitch is known
mm-hmm.
for as a gaming platform, but there's about a 20% subset that are just artists. And so for 6 years, 6 or 7 years, I was on Twitch and I was doing 5 to 6 days a week for about 8 hours a day. I would sit in front of a camera, actually three cameras, and I would, while I was doing my job through Paul Pape Designs, I would sit and create the work, and then I would be live answering questions and talking to the people. And what I found was that a lot of other creatives out there were asking me questions like, how do you figure out what to charge? Or, how did you get this job? Or what's the best way to market yourself? So on and so forth. And then it got me to thinking, like, I had done this for so long and I'd answer the same questions over and over again that I was like, how can I get this out to other people? And so I thought, well, I'm going to start coaching people. So I went out and I decided I was going to get a TEDx talk because I found after Googling, some genius out there said that the best way to get people to know that you're a coach or consultant is to have a TEDx talk. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll try that. And so I just went and got a TEDx talk. And I was going to talk about creativity and how you can make a living at it and to get rid of the starving artist trope. And I was picked up by this TEDx studio out in West Virginia. I'm in Nebraska myself. And I went out there, and it was about 2 weeks before the TEDx went live. And they told me that they didn't want me to do the speech that I had written or that they had uh, basically picked me to do. They wanted me to completely scrap it and go with something else. And again, I'm not a guy who objects to change. And so I was like, yeah, sure. What do you want me to do? And they said, we want you to talk about you. I'm like, okay. At this point in my career, people had started referring to me as Santa for nerds. I did not give myself this this name. People have given it to me, and it's because I seem magical because I can make whatever people want. And so they're like, we want the Santa for Nerds TEDx talk. I'm like, okay, sure. So I had some props with me from things that I've built in the past, and then I did a talk on Santa for Nerds. And then when I got done with that, I got my first coaching client, and it was a company. It was just three people. They were crafters. They were making little dragon figurines, but they had scaled up enough that they were making a little over $1 million a year gross, but their net was about $50,000. They were like really hurting, and they weren't understanding like where their money was going. And so that was obviously my first question. And so I worked with them, and when I was sitting there with them face to face, one of the questions that I asked them, I said, "Well, what do you guys? What's your role in the business?" Because there's three of them. I said, "What do you each do?" And they said, "Oh, we just do everything." And I said, "Well, that's not how to run a business. First and foremost, we need to know what your specific role is." And they kind of looked at me with a glazed look in their eyes because they didn't really understand the whole like how to do a business. They were artists who kind of got thrust into something that kind of blew up. And so I said, well, how about this? Tomorrow we're going to come back and we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons Business Edition, where instead of having a character like a wizard or a thief, we're going to figure out who you are in your business. And then that's going to be the character that you use. And you have to act as though that is your role. And when we encounter issues or problems in the game, the monsters in the game, that whoever has the specialty within their field are going to be the ones who lead the combat. And we ended up playing it for like 4 hours, and business terminology and approaches that were lost to them really started clicking. And I thought, well, I think I'm onto something here with being able to gamify it and make it more fun because they were really mired down. One of the people in that group was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He was having heart issues and and just overall exhaustion from the business. And then by the time we left, he had a smile on his face. We were laughing, we were having a good time. And I thought, well, I think that was the part that was missing is that they didn't understand what business was, and it became so daunting and so oppressive because it was just so foreign to them. And so breaking it down into a language that they understood brought a little bit of life and levity back into them. And so I started pondering some more, and I came up with this book, like you had mentioned before, The Creative Player's Handbook to Business, which basically gamifies entrepreneurship or just owning and running a business. And the reason that that works so well is because everybody this day and age, I say everybody, and I know there's going to be our outliers who raise their hand, and to them I'm like, calm down. But like most people understand gaming. We've got it on our phones, we've got consoles, we've been around it our entire lives. And if you can take a character from level 1 to level 10, then you can easily run a business. You just need somebody to kind of show you the framework and tell you the rules. And that is really what kind of spurred this whole thing. And so the books really talk about that. And if you go through the process of the book, you start with a character sheet, and it basically breaks down. It's about a bunch of introspection that you do to figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at. And the nice thing about it is that it separates you from yourself. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, or a lot of the business owners that I've spoken to, they don't like to admit that they have any flaws. And we don't, but but the reality is that somebody has to have a flaw. And so the best way to accomplish this is to have them create a character, because then it's separate from themselves. They can objectively look at themselves and say, "Oh, my character has this flaw." And even though it's a reflection on themselves, they're not having to admit that they have any weaknesses. But then what that does is that it lets us know what their strengths and weaknesses are in business, so that when we go to find a group, find other people to help them with their business, we can look for people that will help them as opposed to people who are aligned exactly like them. Because there's nothing worse than having five warriors in a group, because whenever you go to encounter a bad guy, you're going to wipe. Your entire team's going to be killed off. And it's the same thing in business. If everybody is the exact same, you need that diversity. You need those other people, the support system in there to help you kind of go through. So that's where we're at.
I think it's such a interesting story about how you went from kind of starting out as making things for kids and for couples into growing into this kind of a business. Did you expect to kind of go down this path for a career, or did you have something completely different in mind?
Uh, I've always told everyone I kind of mow my own path. And what that means is I've got a mower in front of me, but the grass is taller than I am. I can hear everyone around me doing what they're doing, but I have no idea how close or far away they are. I just keep going forward. And it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but the reality is I don't have a direction. I just kind of go where the world takes me. I kind of like keep an ear open to wherever the cosmos wants to pull, and that's where I go. And the the joy of it is as an artist, I found out that there are two types of artists out there that in this regard. There are those that are very rigid to what they want. This is the thing that I do. This is the way that I do it, and this is the way I'll always do it. And then the others that kind of go with the flow. They bend. And what happens is those who are rigid end up being broken. They become the starving artist. They become the person who is bitter to the world, who thinks that nobody likes them. And then eventually when they die, they become very successful because then people start to pay attention to their work. But then there's the other artists that or creatives that kind of bend with it. When somebody asks them, "Hey, can you do this?" They go, "Sure, I can try," or "I don't know, but let's give it a shot." And that's the route that I take. And it was more bending and just kind of seeing where everything goes. And I think that where I am now is like a natural progression of all of this. I spent 20 years fucking up. That's like literally what it is. If you read my books, there's a lot of sections in there that are highlighted in orange, and what they are is they're my tales. It's the things that I've done in business that were wrong, my failures, but they're kind of like cautionary tales so you can see them and hopefully avoid the same pitfalls that I went into. But those 20 years of experiences, because I don't mind failing because I look at it as a stepping stone to success, that it's kind of led me to where I am now to be able to give the advice to people and companies and have them uh, listen to me because I come from a place of I'm not guessing here. Like I've lived this life. It's not, and I've been where they're at, and I understand that I've got places to go. I've got further to go in this journey, and but I can help them out to get further along in theirs with hopefully giving them some shortcuts.
So you've worked with companies worth billions, but you also talk about only needing 100 loyal supporters to build a sustainable creative business. How do those two worlds connect?
So you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought that one up, Noah, because the reality is we're stuck in this life cycle right now of social media. And every time we put our best foot forward on social media, because nobody puts their shitty self out there, they put their best version out there, that we expect there to be millions of likes and views because we see that as a success metric on social media. And so we've been, and especially the younger people, the millennials, the Gen A's, they are uh, basically trained to think that if they do not reach that level of success on their posts or in their business, that they're a failure. The reality is, and this goes back to before there was even social media, you don't need millions of people to buy your product. You do if you're a giant corporation and you'll build that scale over time. But when you're starting out, the first 5, 10, 15 years, 100 good, loyal customers is really all you need. Now, I say it's 100 people, but the reality is that sometimes the person can be a company. Disney, when they hired me, it's just a company. I mean, I dealt with maybe 4 people from Disney because that was the division that I was working within. Um, Granted, they are connected to a multi-billion or trillion-dollar company, but the reality is they're so compartmentalized that most of the time the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. They're all just cogs in a giant, giant machine. And so to me, I just look at Disney or Universal or even Nickelodeon as being just one more customer. They're just a different breed of customer than, say, you would be if you contacted me wanting a very similar thing. So the point is that to be successful, you need 100 people to be consistently purchasing from you. They don't need to be the same 100 people, but just 100 people are the ones that you want to gather. The first 10, your super fans, they're going to do more for you in your business than any amount of ads that you put online or anything like that because people trust other people's opinion. Word of mouth, reviews. I mean, when was the last time you went to a website and didn't get asked to give them a rating or a review? I mean, I can't think about the last time I mortgaged my house and I had them ask me if I could give a review from my mortgage broker. I'm like, everybody wants that validation because coming from another person, that validity matters. And so your top 10 super fans are going to go out and basically preach the gospel of you or your business to let them others know about it. And so those 10 people, all they need to do is find 10 other people, and then you've created your 100 people right there. And so those 100 people will be the the basis of your entire business. And they won't, like I said, won't be the same 100 people over time, but they are enough to keep you going. Now, there's a caveat to that, which is you have to understand your worth before you get your 100 people. And with business, especially with creative based businesses, understanding your worth is something that a lot of creatives struggle with because we're also in the world of Walmarts and Amazons where everything can, or Temu, which can, everything can be bought for $1. And when you're a creative, you've got to understand that you as a person have more value than the thing that you make. And so what I like to tell a lot of creatives is, and I love the fact that I can swear on this podcast because it's more effective when I say it this way, is to stop selling your shit and start selling yourself. Because in the end, you'll never be able to compete with an Amazon or a Temu or a Walmart, but you can make a good living being a creative. You just have to understand that the people are not buying the shit that you make. They're supporting the person who created it. And so the object is less valuable than the person who's creating it in the world that they're enriching. And so their point of view has got way more value than the object that's being created. My entire career has been based on this. When I'm making custom figures for people, for couples, or if I'm making an engagement ring box that is personalized to Harry Potter because they love that, or Lord of the Rings, or whatever, it means something to them. They are supporting me because I am Santa for nerds, this guy, this magical being that can create their memories and make them tangible. They're supporting me. They're buying the object, but they're supporting me. And I think once creatives or any entrepreneur understands that they are the reason that their customer base will support them, then they'll be infinitely more successful. So it's understanding that value first, and then you go and search out your 100 people.
Most business advice tells creatives to think like entrepreneurs, but you're saying the opposite. It's like you want businesses to think more creatively. Why is it traditional business education failing creatives so badly?
There's a phrase that I love to hate, which is it's the way it's always been done. Um, and like I have a terminal degree, which is I went as far as my degree could take me. I have an MFA in theatrical design, and I went to really good schools for it. And the one thing that they really taught me how to do was be an excellent designer of theatrical products, either set or props or costumes. Really, really trained the shit out of me on that. I'm really good at it. What they didn't tell me is how to do anything with that once I left the educational system. So like as soon as you got that piece of paper, they just like boot you in the butt and say, good luck. Now figure it out. And I think that with traditional business, there is an umbrella. There's a safety net of you being hired by someone else. And so you can just step into a role and not have to worry about the how do I do it? You're being told how to do it. But as a creative or as an entrepreneur, you got to figure all that shit out. And so I think that's the biggest failing. And to say, well, it's the way it's always been done plays in here because the traditional approach to business is very linear and it is very, you step A, B, C, and D, and we go in a straight line. And this is how we build our business. You start with, it's like building a pyramid. You need a solid base and we just blah, blah, blah. Creatives are not like that. Creatives are like clouds. We're amorphous and we're scattered, and it's really hard for us to understand that focus and to really kind of drill down into it. And so what happens is you run a straight line through a cloud and you create confusion. It doesn't click with them. And so we have to let go of the idea of doing it the way it's always been done. Mow your own path. There are so many different ways to approach a problem. So the way that I like to, I love to speak in metaphor and simile. It's like 90% of my coaching. And one of the things that I tell them, I said, think about the way it's always been done, this rule that you've been given. I don't know much about you, Noah, but have you ever had a job where you had to watch training videos?
Um, I
Like they
feel
sat you
like I
down and
have.
but you
I feel like
forgot
I
them
have.
instantly, right? So
Yeah.
this is a great analogy into the way it's always been done. So a training video, it's basically, let's say Julie is really good at her job, and management sees that Julie is really good for at her job, but she's going to eventually retire. And they're like, Julie, they go to her one day and they're like, Julie, you've got this down. You really understand what we're after. You are like the heart and soul of this business. And what we would like to do is we'd like you to train the next person. So we want you to tell everyone how you did it. And we're going to record it and we're going to give that to the replacement when you ever decide to leave this company. And Julie's thrilled about it because, she's spent the last 30 years at this business figuring out how to do this job. And now she's got it down pat and she is the expert that they all go to. And so she records this beautiful training video. And then she retires, and then they use that same recording, that same training video for 20, 30 years because Julie did it right, damn it. Well, what happens is everyone who watches that video is trying to become Julie. They're not going to. No, because a lot of the things that affected Julie in her life is what allowed her to be good at that job. And so what they're now doing is say, do it the way that Julie did it, but no one is going to. And so they spend a lot of time trying to fit into a mold that they don't belong. And then what they do is they break the mold little by little. They find shortcuts, they find different ways that work for them to make the job happen. That's breaking that whole it's the way it's always been done rule. And so what we need to do is we need to let people know it's okay to find a different way as long as the solution is the solution we're looking for and it doesn't cost us extra money. It doesn't, and it might at first. And I don't want to, lie to anybody and say that change doesn't cost because it does, but you might find that it becomes more efficient. I have a good friend of mine who went into a business and he had a theatrical background, but it was a roofing company and they needed him as somebody to be in charge of some of the finances. And he went in there and this company had been around for over 20 years and they had their method down pat. My friend came in there and he's like, can I change anything? They're like, no, we don't change anything. This is the way we've always done. He's like, okay, fine. And so they would give him all this information and he, on the side, created a spreadsheet that allowed him to do his entire week's worth of work within 3 hours on a Monday. And then he would tell me, he's like, I spent all of my time watching YouTube and trying not to get caught because he's already done all the work because they won't change their system. And so the way it's always been done then gets affected. He broke that little mold that he was in, found a more efficient way to do it, but now is spending all of his time trying to be deceitful because the person who's in charge doesn't allow him to expand or make the business better because we're all stuck in that trap of the way it's always been done. I think I answered your question there. I get tangential.
You're good, no worries. What's one thing that, from your experience that you've seen with businesses that you wish that people really need to really consider if they would like to have a successful business?
I would say story. If I could go back and change anything, and if you watch any commercials or if you watch a movie trailer, anything like that, the thing that draws you in is the story. And we as a people have become, especially in the United States, have become so commodity driven, so object driven, because we're constantly inundated with, hey, we can get this, really cheap thing on TikTok. We can get this, great deal on Amazon Prime or whatever, that we've become object driven. But the reality is since the days of caveman, story has been the thing that we have passed down. And it's the thing that humans are programmed to remember and to recall when they're trying to make decisions. Does it have an emotional pull? Is it a scary thing? What's the lesson that's involved? And we can't get that from an object in front of us. If I set something in front of you, you're not going to learn a lesson from it. You're like, that's just a thing. But if I told you the story behind it, you would remember it. Like I said, I love to talk in metaphor and simile. When I was in undergrad, I had a theater history professor who was not the best theater history professor, and she would just wax poetic all day long, barely touching on the subject matter. And she would just tell us stories about her life as a theater person going throughout the world and looking at all this stuff. And I remember I took this test once where she was asking all these questions of subject matter she never touched on that we were just supposed to read in the book. But the only thing that I remembered from the entire lesson is where the two vending machines in the Roman Colosseum are, because that was a story that she told me, and that story resonated and stuck with me because it was just humorous and out of place. And that's the thing that stuck with me. And as a business, I can't stress enough how, especially for creative business, how story is way more important than the product that you're making. It falls right back into the don't sell your shit, sell yourself. Become the story of your journey and express it to people. Don't hide behind the product that you're making. When we accept that, when we really embrace the storytelling aspect of things, your products naturally sell themselves. We don't have to work so hard. I mean, if you've ever seen one of the Budweiser commercials with the Clydesdales that they used to show, and there's, it's a heartstring message and has absolutely nothing to do with beer, but we all understand it, and we'll buy Budweiser because of those damn horses. And that's because that's a story that they're selling. It has nothing to do, the end of that one is the horses pull the beer. Who cares? It doesn't, that's not the important thing. They're really working on the story of hearts, pulling on the heartstrings of other people to make them emotionally invested into the product.
It's funny that you had mentioned that about, you know, businesses and brands kind of come up with a good motto. Does coming out with a good motto or tagline really determine a success rate in businesses?
Um, if it's memorable enough, but memorable in a good way, sure. I mean, it can affect it. I don't think that it is the bottom line. A catchy jingle will do a lot more than a catchy motto. I mean, I'm even racking my brain right now, just trying to think of any catchy mottos or taglines for a business that are even coming to mind. For me, I'd rather I'd rather concentrate on, yeah, like literally, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Um, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think the other thing is it's a good catchy uh, motto or a tagline or something like that is a lot like a nickname. You can't give it to yourself because when you do, you're trying to force something to happen, and it's just not going to work. Um, like I didn't call myself Santa for nerds because that would just be weird. It's something that you earn. So I think as a business, when you're starting out, don't worry so much about that aspect of it. It will naturally come, it'll float to the top. Somebody will say it offhandedly or whatever, and you're like, damn, that's really clever. You'll use that. I it's not a necessity when you're starting out, and I wouldn't have that be the thing that um like it becomes the crux of your business. Like I use Santa for nerds only because it's really hard to explain to somebody succinctly what it is that I do for a living in Paul Pape Designs. And so I say Santa for nerds, and it piques their curiosity. They're like, I don't know exactly what that is, but I know what a Santa is. I know what a nerd is. And then they're curious enough to want to know more. And that's what a tagline or a motto should do. It should make them curious enough to want to know more that they look into it.
Well, you worked for companies like Disney, Universal, and Nickelodeon. What was some of the key takeaways from those jobs that you have used for your career in later years and have taught other businesses to have as well?
I, most of the takeaways that I have from them are actually negative takeaways, and it comes back to the nobody knows what anybody else is doing type situation. When I was working with Nickelodeon, I was doing some work for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and um, I was the designer. I was making, they were doing a promotional in which they needed a bunch of custom Xboxes created with basically a bunch of art around them to help promote the relaunch of the 80s version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so I was working hand in hand with Nickelodeon, who was actually like their art dev team, who were actually coming out with it. But anytime that I spoke with any of them, it's like, hey, I got a question about this one. The person that I'd speak to had never, like, it was a new person every single time. And so what happened was that there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, I really like this," and then the next person's like, "Oh, I don't like that. I like this." And it's just a lot of no one knows what the hell. No one's making a decision. And so that became difficult. So that's probably like one of the biggest ones is that it's so compartmentalized that there's no one in charge giving you the yes or no. The other thing that I would say is it's taught me a lot about, and I express this to a lot of people, about safeguarding yourself in contracts. Whenever you're working with a large company or whenever you're going into business with with another person, there should always be some kind of agreement between you. And I talk about this a lot in my book. A great example of this was like with Disney. Disney's contracts are almost airtight. They're so crazy. But one of the things that they state is that when you're under our employ, like when you're under contract, any idea that you generate is theirs. It doesn't matter if you're not like I'm in Nebraska, they're in Orlando and California, but it doesn't matter. Like if I come up with a brilliant idea in the time frame that I'm under contract, it is theirs. And so you've got to really be careful about stuff like that. And they say that they own it from here into eternity in this universe, in any other universe. It's literally in their contract, which is crazy. And they've got the pockets and the lawyers to be able to help fight that. And so you've got to really understand the contracts that you're signing. Don't get blinded by the fact that you're working with a big company. Definitely read your contracts. And if you don't understand what you're reading, find somebody who does. And with AI these days, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, you can always upload that information and have it break it down to you and say, explain it like I'm five. And it will do exactly that. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other major lessons that like working with those companies. They are just people, that I think that's another one is like we say, oh, you've worked for Disney. And the reason I say Disney, Nickelodeon, and Universal is because it's a known entity, it's a large entity, and people go, oh, that's impressive. But the reality is you're just working with people and they're just trying to get a job done. It came down from on high that they needed to have something, and then they need somebody who can help them accomplish that. And that's really what your job is. And that's what everybody's job is. And so I think the reality is don't let that aspect of it, the fact that they are a large corporation or this or something that you're very familiar with, that you grew up with or whatever, blind you to the fact that it is a business and that they're out for something very specific. So you've got to just remember they're people too. We all have our own agendas. We're all trying to get something accomplished. Just make sure that you're treating them as equals because especially if you're working with them, because that's typically if you're freelance like I am and they bring you in, you're not working for them, you're working with them because they needed your skills. So it brings you up in elevation. And I think it's a mindset thing there. Because I can say, oh, I worked for these companies, but then it sounds like you're the low man on the totem pole, when the reality is you're working with them because they needed your help. And so it helps to elevate your status just a little bit, even if it's just mentally. And that, if everybody looks at that from that point of view, then the mystique kind of goes away and it's just part of the job.
When you got offered the opportunity to do your TED Talk, what was that feeling of being finally of being on a stage? Were you nervous to present this idea of what you had learned, or were you really kind of prepared and excited to finally kind of get this truth out to where you could really help a lot of people that are starting businesses be able to thrive?
I think the, the big thing is one, my tism does not allow me to be nervous on stage. I'm just not that person. That's just the way it is. And so for me, it was a great opportunity. I've worked with many people who have had their own TEDs and they became nervous wrecks, even though they talk publicly all the time. It's just that I'm kind of broken in that way. But what I looked at it when I did it, I was like, I thought okay, I'll dispel some mystique here. I thought when I got my TEDx that it would be a door opener. And what I realized is that it's like earning a degree. And that's the only weight that it has. When people see it on your resume, on your LinkedIn or whatever, people are like, oh, you've gone the extra mile to do that something special, like earning your MFA. But the thing of it is, what do they call the guy who graduated last in his doctorate program? They call him doctor. It doesn't matter if you're first or last, it's still the same accomplishment. And so it's the same thing with the TED. It didn't elevate me to any new avenue. It just opened an opportunity for me to pursue uh, other opportunities because I now had that tick mark. I had that degree. I had that notoriety that came with it. And I'm not saying that it's a negative. It's a great opportunity to get your message out in front of other people who would otherwise not know that you exist, which is the best thing about it. and to explain to them what it's like to do the thing that you're going up on stage to let these people know how you can change their, how they can change their lives or whatever. But the reality is that the majority of people who watch these videos aren't motivated to do anything with it. They're just collecting information, much like how we scroll through social media and we just absorb, we consume. And so, I mean, that's unfortunately the reality of TED. I loved it. It was a great experience, and it allowed me to understand and see that side of the world. But coming from theater, um, it's very much it's theater done business style, which is hilarious to me. My wife is a costume designer for theater. That's how we actually met. And so when we go to watch other TEDs, we are constantly looking for the theatricality of it, because the reality of TEDx is you're giving a monologue on stage with some lights and some cameras and an audience. And it's just live theater. It's a monologue. But because it's approached from a business point of view, because it's supposed to be this learning, educational, adventure that you're having with all of these people giving insight, these normal everyday people, it loses some of its life. And when I am helping other people with their TEDs, the one thing that I have to remind them is you've got to put the life back into it. Don't let them take that out of it, out of that opportunity.
When you're helping someone who's been told that they'll never make it as a solo creative, just kind of how like you were, what's the first mindset shift that you do to help them make?
The, when so not being able to make it, I think that most people aren't really told. I mean, I guess if you're going into the arts, your family might be one of the ones that say, "Oh, the arts, you'll never make a living at that. You're gonna be poor for the rest of your life," that kind of thing. But rarely have I found somebody who's ever been told up front, "Hey, you're never gonna make it in this." The reality is that it's internal. It's an internal thing. It's like, I want to do this, but I don't know that I have it. It kind of plays into the imposter syndrome, or you're not, then I'm not good enough type of situation. And so what I tell a lot of people it is twofold. There's two avenues that I can take on this. The first one is that your journey is so unique. Like, no, like there's no way anyone can know what your journey is. If you write, even if you write it all down, no, because when we read something, even if it's super in depth, we are projecting our journey onto that journey. And so your voice is so utterly unique. There is only you, and there will only ever be you in, ever. And so when we have that, you'll never make it. I like to emphasize, I said, you have a voice here that is so utterly unique that, as long as you can do the second avenue, you will be successful in this. And but that's a self-discovery thing. That's an internal thing. It's a mental thing that they have to get over. And a lot of people can't. They don't think that they're unique enough or special enough. They get bogged down in the imposter syndrome. Now, the second avenue is I ask people two questions, and this is actually the crux of my entire book, and it seems so simple, but the two questions are, what are you passionate about? That's the first one. And everybody's passionate about something. And then the second question is what do you do with that passion that is unique to anyone else who's passionate about the same thing? And they can always answer the first question right off the bat. The second question, they either have a flippant answer right off the bat, or they just get quiet because they hadn't really thought about it. That's answer to that second question is your business. That's your business right there. That is literally what I call the seed or the crux or the foundation of your entire business. And so being told that you can't do it, it's like, well, as long as you have that unique approach, as long as you have the mindset that you are different enough and that you have a voice that's strong enough to stand on its own, you can be successful. It's just you have to believe in you before anyone else can.
For someone who's listening that has been avoiding the business side of their creativity because it feels overwhelming and just a lot to handle, what's one gaming principle that they could apply today to make it less intimidating?
like if you're a gamer, you understand what it's like to grind. It's a gaming term that where you're trying to get to that next level, but you got to do a monotonous thing over and over and over again. In World of Warcraft, it's the first levels is like killing boars. You got to go kill 40 things, or you got to harvest 10 of this and then 12 of that, or whatever. And it's boring, it's monotonous, but you understand that there is a reward at the end of it. You will level up. You will get better materials or armor or weapons. Business is exactly the same thing. There's going to be parts of it that are monotonous and boring and they're going to suck. But if you only look at it from that perspective, you'll not want to proceed. Give yourself the reward. Understanding what the carrot is on the stick for yourself is going to motivate you so much better. We as giant monkeys are trained to understand the reward system. Our brains are wired so that we will get an endorphin kick when when we do something good, when we see, and we like that. We will chase that high forever. When we are doing our own business, we lose sight of that reward. And what happens is we just look at everything as being the slog that it is, as opposed to the slog and the reward, the slog and the reward. And uh, you have to figure out what it is going to be the best motivational factor in your life. I mean, I can tell you what all of mine are, but they're not going to be the same for every person. But if you're starting out a business and you're if you're creative and you're starting out and you feel like it's all daunting, take tiny steps. Go collect your first 10 mushrooms in the forest. There's going to be something that you can do and then reward yourself with it. How I accomplished this when I was starting out is anytime somebody hired me to do something and I had to make something, I would get a new tool for my toolbox from that job. That was my reward. If I could accomplish the job, I got the new tool. So I was always motivated to do it because I was excited to be adding something to my collection. So I've got tons of tools around me because those are a nice motivating factor. It doesn't have to be a thing, though. It can be, a way that you feel. It could be a vacation that you take. You can go see a movie. It can be something else, but you need to understand what that reward is going to do for you and how to and that it doesn't have to be a 10-mile hike before you get that reward. It can be the first 50 feet and just train yourself to understand that it is task reward, task reward, task reward.
If people would like to, if they would like to get in contact with you, and maybe if businesses are listening and they have questions about creativity and how they could help expand their business more, but they don't really have a creative mindset or struggle with the creativity, where can they find you and get in contact with you on how you can give them some great advice?
You just go to gamifybusiness.com, and then I have a contact form that's there. And if your listeners are interested in this, if they go to gamifybusiness.com/podcast, they can actually download the first couple chapters of the book and they can kind of see what the system's all about. And then if they're interested in learning more, having some one-on-one coaching, or to get a deeper dive into it, they can just drop me a line. I don't have automated assistants or VAs. If you leave me a message, you will be talking to me directly.
Well, Paul, I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your story with my listeners and sharing some great advice. I think that my audience will really resonate with that. And I think businesses need to learn and take up upon his offer to really think about getting some help, because starting a business nowadays is hard. And if you're not, especially if you're not real creative, it's difficult. I'm not, because most people or some people are not really artistic. And, the whole point of a business is you have to create logos, you have to create mottos for everything, and that's hard. So I really suggest people to check Paul out and reach out to him on some advice for that. Um, if you would like to follow me on social media as well as my listeners, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, or Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And feel free to follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm on all the major platforms. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere, so feel free to follow and subscribe to it so that you'll get notified of when new episodes drop. Appreciate you all so much for tuning in to today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.